turning your financial bills into manifested blessings, using Scovel Shinn's secret law. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the very envelope you dread opening is only a coded message from your own consciousness, waiting for you to translate it into good. There is a moment every one of us knows, the moment you see the return address on an envelope and something in your chest drops before you even open it. You are not the only one. So many good and faithful people carry that same small flinch, and Florence Scovel Shinn would say that flinch is the whole story. Because the bill itself is neutral. It is only paper. It is your reaction to it that decides whether it becomes a burden or a doorway. The scripture that carries this truth says, "But my God shall supply all your need, according to his riches in glory." This is spoken in Philippians 4:19, and notice it does not say, "Your God shall supply your need, according to your bank balance." It says, "according to his riches in glory." Florence Scovel Shinn would stop you right there and say, "Do you see it? The supply is never measured by what is in your hand today. It is measured by the riches already established in the unseen, waiting only for your faith to call them forth." So the bill in your hand is not a measure of your lack. It is only an invitation to remember where your real account is kept. Before we go further, let us plant a word in your mouth that begins to turn every bill into a blessing right now. Say it with me. I bless every bill that comes to my hand. I call it a messenger of my abundant supply. My word is my wand. Again, I bless every bill that comes to my hand. I call it a messenger of my abundant supply. My word is my wand. If something in you just softened a little as you said those words, if some old tightness around money loosened even slightly, type the 2 words God supplies in the comments right now. Let it be your seal on what you have just claimed, not a hope but a decree, and let us continue together into the keys that make this real in your everyday life. The first key is that a bill is not a debt. It is a disguised check waiting for you to endorse it with the right words. Most people see a number on a bill and feel it as a subtraction from their life. But Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the numbers on a bill and the numbers on a blessing are made of the very same substance. The difference is only in your interpretation. Picture 2 people receiving the identical bill in the mail. One clutches their stomach and says, "Here we go again." The other exhales and says, "Thank you for this reminder that I am cared for." The paper is identical, the ink is identical, the outcome in their lives will not be identical at all, because one has just spoken lack into being, and the other has just spoken supply into being. It is not the bill that decides your future, it is the sentence you attach to it. Picture a woman at her kitchen counter, 1 week sorting envelopes with a sigh already forming, her shoulders curling inward as if bracing for a blow. Another week, having learned this key, she pauses, breathes, and simply says, "This is only paper, asking to be turned into good." Her income has not changed, only her sentence has, and that sentence is the whole hinge the door swings on. The peace comes first, spoken deliberately over the very thing that used to frighten us. And the finances rearrange themselves to match the peace already claimed. So this week, before opening a single piece of mail, decide in advance what you will say about it. Let your first small decree be this: I turn every bill I see into a blessing I already claim. The second key is that your checkbook is not your bank. Your consciousness is your bank. And every other account is simply a mirror reflecting what has already been deposited in that deeper vault. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the visible account is always secondary to the invisible one. You can rearrange numbers on a screen all day, but if the inner account is still convinced of scarcity, the outer numbers will always find a way to prove it right. This is why so many people work hard, earn more, and still feel behind. They have been trying to fix the mirror instead of fixing the face. Think of a woman who receives a small windfall, and within days, an unexpected repair bill swallows it whole. She says money never stays with me, not realizing that sentence is the very lock on her own vault. If instead she had said, "My true supply is never diminished, it flows freely and returns to me multiplied," the windfall would have had room to grow instead of a reason to vanish. The bank of consciousness never closes its doors and never runs low on reserves. It is not measured in dollars. It is measured only in belief, and belief, once deposited, compounds quietly whether you are watching it or not. Consider a man who checks his balance 10 times a day. Each glance tightening his shoulders, he believes he is managing his money, but he is only rehearsing his fear of it, and consciousness obliges by matching the rehearsal. Now consider a woman who checks her balance once, calmly, and spends the rest of her day affirming she is divinely supplied, in ways her balance cannot yet show. She is not ignoring her finances, she is banking somewhere deeper than the screen. The outer account is only the teller's window. It hands you what the vault behind it has already decided to give. So if the window seems slow, do not shout at the window. Walk instead into the vault itself and make a new deposit of trust. Your outer balance is only bookkeeping. The real ledger is kept in the quiet rooms of your own belief. So today, look past the number on the screen and ask what belief that number is proving. Then change the belief and let the number eventually catch up. Here is your decree for this key. My consciousness is my true bank and it is always full. The third key is that the word "oh" is a story your mind tells, not a fact chiseled into your life. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that words carry creative power, and few words are spoken with more dread than "I owe," said over and over. That phrase becomes a groove worn into consciousness, and consciousness, being faithful, keeps producing more situations to match the groove. It is not that debt itself is a moral failing. It is that the constant inner chant of "I owe, I owe, I owe" becomes a magnet for more owing. Picture a man reviewing his accounts each month with a knot in his stomach, muttering under his breath, "I will never get ahead of this." That sentence is not a complaint, it is a request, spoken into the great creative law, and the law, being obedient, answers it. Now picture that same man instead saying, "Every payment I make flows easily because my supply is endless." The situation on paper may be the same for a while, but the atmosphere around him begins to shift. Doors of unexpected income begin to appear because his words have stopped building walls against them. Consider also a young woman who kept a small notebook where she wrote down every debt in red ink, and each time she opened it, she whispered the same tired phrase, "I will always owe someone something." Florence Scovel Shinn would say that notebook was not recording her finances, it was rehearsing her future. One evening she crossed out the red words and wrote instead, in gold ink, "I am always in the process of being freely and easily supplied." Nothing in her bank account changed that night, but something in her shoulders did. And within weeks, small, almost playful sums of money began finding their way to her. A returned deposit, an old debt someone else owed her suddenly repaid, as though her new sentence had gone out ahead of her and begun clearing a path. It is not the debt that keeps a person bound. It is the sentence spoken about the debt on repeat. The number on the page is only ink. It is your daily muttering that turns that ink into a wall or into a door. So choose new language this week. Not "I owe," but "I flow." Notice how differently those two small words sit in the mouth. One clenches, the other opens. Speak the second one on purpose, even quietly, even privately, every single time the old one tries to rise up first. Let this be your decree. What I speak about my finances becomes the shape of my finances. The fourth key is that the old self who signed for lack must be allowed to quietly dissolve, so that the true self who is heir to abundance can finally sign in its place. And let us be very clear here, when we speak of this old self dying, we do not mean any harm to you or any part of you as a person. We mean only that the false identity, the one who believed itself poor, unworthy, always behind, always catching up, that identity was never who you truly are. It was a costume worn so long you mistook it for skin. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that most people keep renewing their financial trouble simply because they keep renewing their old self-concept of being someone financial trouble happens to. Think of someone who grew up hearing, "There is never enough. We cannot afford that. Money does not grow on trees." That child grows into an adult who, even with a healthy income, still feels an ambient hum of not enough, still hesitates before spending on anything joyful, still braces for the bill before it even arrives. This bracing is not caution, it is loyalty. Unconscious loyalty to an old identity that has long outlived its usefulness. The dissolving we speak of is simply the letting go of that loyalty. It is choosing, gently and deliberately, to stop introducing yourself, even silently, as someone for whom money is hard. Imagine that old identity, like a coat you have worn every winter for decades. It is threadbare now. It no longer fits the person you are becoming, but you keep reaching for it out of habit each morning. The fourth key asks you to simply leave the coat on the hook one day and see how the air feels without it. Notice how much energy has been spent maintaining a story that never served you. The moment you stop feeding that story with your attention and your language, it naturally begins to fade. Not through force, not through struggle, but through simple withdrawal of belief. This is the same mercy the scriptures describe when they speak of putting off the old and putting on the new. It was never meant as punishment. It was always meant as liberation. Consider how this plays out in an ordinary week. A man sits down at his kitchen table on a Sunday evening. The same table, the same lamp, the same stack of papers he has faced 100 times before, and out of pure habit he says, under his breath, "This is just how it is for me. I will always be scraping by." He does not even notice he has said it. It is as automatic as breathing. But that sentence is not neutral. It is a signature. It is the old self quietly renewing its lease on his life for another month. Now picture that same man, same table, same lamp, choosing instead to pause before he speaks, and saying softly, "I am not the man who scrapes by. That man is fading. I am the man who is learning abundance. Nothing on the table has changed. The numbers are the same, but the identity signing the check has changed." And Florence Scovel Shinn taught that it is always the identity, never the arithmetic, that determines what happens next. Notice, too, how gently this dissolving happens. It is not a war you fight against yourself. It is more like morning fog fading when the sun simply continues rising. The sun does not attack the fog. It does not struggle against it. It simply keeps shining. And the fog, having nothing to resist, quietly lifts on its own. This is exactly how your old scarcity self leaves, not through gritted teeth and force of will, but through steady, patient shining, through choosing new words again and again, until the old ones simply have nowhere left to live. So this week, notice every time you are tempted to describe yourself in the old scarcity language, and gently, without any shame, choose a new description instead. Not "I have never been good with money," but "I am learning to be a wise and joyful steward of abundance." Not "that is just how it is for people like me," but "my circumstances are catching up to my new belief." Let the fading be unhurried. Let it be kind. Here is your decree for this key. I release the self who believed in lack, and I welcome the self who knows abundance. You have just spoken something powerful over your own life. Take a breath and let it settle. If this teaching is touching something real in you, subscribe so the next one finds you. The fifth key is that panic is a phone call to famine, and calm is a phone call to plenty, and the great creative law is always listening on the other end of the line, ready to answer whichever call you place. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that fear is simply faith pointed in the wrong direction, and both fear and faith are answered according to their own nature. When a bill arrives and your breath quickens, your shoulders tighten, and your mind starts spinning worst-case scenarios, you have just dialed a very specific number, and something on the other end is already arranging itself to answer that call. But when you can meet the very same bill with a steady breath, a quiet mind, and a simple decree of trust, you have dialed a completely different number, and a completely different answer begins arranging itself for you. The bill has not changed, only the number you dialed has changed. This week, when you feel that familiar tightening, pause, breathe once, slowly, and consciously redial with these words: I answer every fear with the quiet certainty that I am fully supplied. The sixth key is that the mailbox is only a symbol, never a sentence. And Florence Scovel Shinn taught that we so often confuse the messenger with the message. A symbol carries no meaning of its own. It is simply a shape, a sound, a piece of paper, or a notification on a glowing screen. And it is you, and only you, who reaches in and hands it its meaning. Two people can stand at the very same mailbox, lift out the very same kind of envelope, and walk away, carrying two entirely different worlds inside them. One carries dread. The other carries mild curiosity. The mailbox did not choose which world to hand out. It simply held the envelope until a meaning was assigned to it. Let us walk through an ordinary day, the way so many of us actually live it. In the morning, you check your phone and see a low-balance notification. Your stomach tightens. Mid-morning, a message asks to be paid back for something small, and a flicker of guilt moves through you. At noon, an envelope from a familiar company makes your heart sink before you even open it. In the afternoon, a co-worker mentions an unexpected expense, and a small wave of anxious agreement rises in you. By evening, you sit down to pay what is owed, and the whole day has been, without your realizing it, a quiet rehearsal of lack, repeated 5 or 6 times before dinner, each one small, together writing a chapter you never consciously chose. Now imagine the same day lived with this key in hand. The low balance becomes information, not identity. The request for repayment is met calmly, without guilt, because giving and receiving both flow freely through you. The envelope becomes simply paper, not verdict. The co-worker's worry becomes something you bless without absorbing, and paying in the evening becomes an act of quiet confidence rather than dread. Not one fact of the day has changed. Only your relationship to each moment has changed, and that relationship is the entire difference between a day that drains your supply and a day that quietly builds it. Picture a blank screen at the front of a darkened room. It has no opinion about what is projected onto it. One day, a film of scarcity plays, and the room fills with tension. Another day, a film of quiet trust plays instead, and the very same screen feels completely different to sit in. The mailbox, the notification, the envelope, they are only the screen. They were never the film. You have simply forgotten that you are the one holding the projector. So pause for a moment and pick one real trigger from your own week. One notification, one envelope, one conversation that usually tightens you, and decide now the words you will say to yourself the next time it appears, because the moment is coming, and you may as well meet it already dressed in peace. Here is your decree. I meet every symbol of lack with the quiet knowledge of my own abundant supply. The 7th key is the deepest one, and it unfolds in several pieces, so let us take it slowly, and let each piece land fully before moving to the next. First, consider that gratitude is not a reaction you have after the good arrives. Gratitude is the very language that summons the good in the first place. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that thanksgiving is one of the most powerful and most underused tools in all of consciousness. Most people save their gratitude for after the check clears, after the bill is paid, after the crisis passes. But she taught something almost scandalous by comparison. Be thankful now. Be thankful while the bill still sits unopened on the counter, because gratitude spoken in advance is not naivety, it is a claim staked on the unseen. It says to the universe, I already trust you, and the universe, being faithful, moves to justify that trust. It is not thanksgiving after the fact, it is thanksgiving as the fact, spoken before the evidence appears, so the evidence has somewhere to land. Second, consider what it actually looks like to be grateful for a bill before it is paid. This does not mean pretending you enjoy owing money. It means recognizing the bill as proof that you are already living inside a system of exchange, of service given and service received, of lights that turn on when you flip the switch, of water that flows when you turn the tap, of a roof that held steady through last night's storm. Every bill is evidence that you have already been supplied. The payment simply completes a circle that already began in your favor. When you can look at a bill and say thank you for the service already rendered to me, you have quietly turned it from a demand into a receipt. A receipt is proof of something already given, not something still feared. It is not a bill you are dreading, it is a receipt you have not yet recognized. Third, consider the woman who, every single month, took her stack of bills, laid them out on the table, and before writing a single check, placed her hand over each one and said, "Thank you. I am overflowingly supplied to meet you." She did this whether her account was full or nearly empty, especially when it was nearly empty, and over time, what had once been a monthly ritual of anxiety became a monthly ritual of quiet celebration. Opportunities began arriving from unexpected directions. A refund she had forgotten about, a client who paid early, a gift from a relative with no occasion attached. None of these things came because she demanded them. They came because her gratitude had already made room for them before they arrived. Fourth, consider a different kind of household entirely. A young couple sitting down on a Sunday evening with a shoebox of receipts and a shared sense of dread. They used to call it bill night, and the very name had already decided the feeling of the evening before either of them said a single word. 1 week. Almost by accident, they tried something different. They lit a candle, and instead of sighing over each envelope, they took turns saying out loud one thing that Bill had given them. The electric bill became thank you for light in every room after dark. The water bill became thank you for a hot shower this morning. The loan payment became thank you for the roof that has sheltered us through every season. Within a few months, they noticed the dread had quietly moved out of the room. Bill night had become, without either of them announcing it, gratitude night, and their finances, slowly and without drama, began to loosen as well. It is not that the candle changed the numbers, it is that the gratitude changed the two people looking at the numbers, and changed people always eventually meet changed circumstances. Fifth, consider that unpaid gratitude works exactly like unpaid debt, in reverse. Just as a debt unacknowledged tends to grow heavier in the mind, a gratitude unspoken tends to shrink in its power. The difference between a bill that crushes you and a bill that barely touches your peace is very often simply whether you spoke thanks over it before you spoke fear over it. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the tongue is the pen that writes upon the unseen substance of your life, and thanksgiving, spoken even through slightly clenched teeth at first, begins to rewrite what fear has already written. You do not need to feel it fully the first time you say it. You only need to keep saying it until the feeling catches up to the words. Sixth, and this is the turn this key has been walking toward the whole time. When you make gratitude your first response to every bill, you are not performing a trick to fool the universe. You are aligning yourself with what is already true. You are already supplied. You have always been supplied. The bill is simply the moment where that supply is asked to move visibly through your hands. Gratitude does not manufacture the supply from nothing. Gratitude simply clears the channel, so the supply that was always there can finally flow through without obstruction. This is why she taught that the receipt exists before the payment in consciousness. The payment in the visible world is only the shadow of a decision already made in the invisible one. It is not the paying that proves your abundance. It is the thanking that reveals it. So this week, before you pay a single bill, place your hand over it if you are able, and simply say, "Thank you for this proof that I am supplied." Watch, over the coming weeks, how the atmosphere around your finances begins to soften, how the dread that once met you at the mailbox begins to feel more like an old habit you are gently outgrowing. Here is your decree for this, the deepest key of all. I give thanks before the payment, because my supply was never in question. The eighth key is that every payment made in peace opens a door for payment received in kind. And this is simply the completion of the circle we spoke of a moment ago. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that money, like all supply, moves in a circulation, never in a straight line from you outward with nothing returning. She often said that money is only a symbol of supply, and supply itself is like the tide, always moving out so that it may move back in. When you pay a bill through gritted teeth, resenting every dollar as it leaves your hand, you are quietly closing the circuit, saying, "This is leaving me, and nothing will come back to replace it," and the law simply agrees with you. But when you pay that same bill with an open, peaceful hand, blessing the money as it goes, thanking it for the service it rendered, and expecting more to flow in behind it, you keep the circuit wide open, and the law agrees with that instead. It is not the paying that determines your future. It is the feeling behind the paying that determines it. Think of two neighbors paying the exact same utility bill on the same afternoon. One sighs, watching the number leave as though a piece of security has been carried off with it. The other writes the very same check and whispers over it, "Go and multiply as you serve someone else's need, and return to me increased." One neighbor's month feels like a slow leak. The other's feels like a steady tide that keeps replenishing itself. The dollar amount leaving was identical. The consciousness behind it was not. And consciousness always writes the next chapter. This is simply the law of breathing applied to money. You cannot only exhale forever, and you were never meant to only spend forever either. Releasing money in peace is exhaling in trust. Already confident the inhale is on its way. Consider too the habit of checking a balance the moment after paying, bracing to see the damage, as though confirming a loss rather than a completed exchange. That quiet habit teaches consciousness to expect depletion. So try instead, just once this week, looking at that lowered number and saying, "This number is temporary, my supply is not." Notice how much lighter that feels almost immediately. Bless your money as it leaves your hands this week. Out loud if you are alone, silently if you are not. Let it go out like a friend sent on a good errand rather than a hostage taken from you. Here is your decree for this key. I release money in peace, and I trust it always returns to me increased. The ninth key is that the last bill you pay in faith becomes the very first blessing you learn to recognize. And this is where all 8 keys before this one quietly gather themselves into a single truth. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that every ending in the visible world is only a beginning wearing a disguise. The bill that finally clears is not simply gone. It has done its work. It has given you an opportunity to practice trust, to speak differently, to feel differently. And each time you meet a bill this way, you are laying down one more stone on a path that leads somewhere far better than where you started. Think of the very first bill you paid, using even one of these keys this week, however small it felt in the moment. That one small shift in how you met it is already beginning to move something larger in your life. You may not see the fruit of it for a few days or a few weeks, but it is moving, the way a seed moves quietly underground, long before anything is visible above the soil. So let this final key be a quiet celebration, rather than a heavy lesson. You have already begun turning your bills into blessings. Simply by hearing these words and letting them settle into you, here is your decree. Every bill I meet in faith becomes a blessing I can already feel arriving. Here is the whole picture. A bill is not a debt, but a disguised check waiting for your endorsement. Your consciousness, and not your checkbook, is the true bank you draw from. What you speak about your finances becomes the very shape your finances take. The old self who believed in lack must simply be allowed to dissolve so the true self can rise. Fear is only faith dialing the wrong number, and calm redials it correctly. The mailbox and every ordinary trigger of the day are symbols and never sentences. Gratitude spoken before the payment is the receipt that clears the channel for supply already yours. Every payment released in peace opens the door for supply to return increased, and the last bill paid in faith becomes the first blessing your eyes learn to see. 9 keys, and really, one single key, turned 9 different ways. The recognition that your bills were never enemies of your abundance. They were always, quietly, its messengers. If you have felt something shifting in you as you listened, if you sense that you are ready to practice these laws daily, instead of only remembering them occasionally, we have built something gentle and steady for exactly this. It is called the Overflow Covenant, a simple daily practice rooted entirely in these teachings of Florence Scovel Shinn, guiding you gently through your own finances, your own words, your own consciousness, one day at a time. It is available for a small one-time gift of $27, fully covered by a 30-day guarantee, so there is truly nothing to lose and only your peace to gain. You will find the link in the description below, and if you feel that quiet inner yes right now, let that be enough reason to follow it. Let us speak our word once more before we go. Say it with your whole heart. I bless every bill that comes to my hand. I call it a messenger of my abundant supply. My word is my wand. And so, dear friend, the very bills waiting quietly in your home today are not what they appear to be. They are simply blessings that have not yet been recognized, and recognition, as you now know, is entirely within your own gentle power.